Why should data scientists be learning cloud? I gave a couple of examples up front that we have lots more data than ever before, and those data sets are getting exponentially larger over time. Model sizes are getting exponentially larger over time. But why can't we just entrust that to other people? I guess like
Good
other
point.
kinds of practitioners. Why should data scientists themselves be capable of handling their own cloud infrastructure?
That's a good question. Let's to paint a picture. Let's start with what is cloud of, like as a first stepping stone. Because what is cloud? Because just to make sure everybody's on the same page of like the benefits of using cloud. So basically, a company can have IT infrastructure on premises, but then it has to worry about buying the physical servers, maintaining a physical space for them, maintaining security, managing those servers, servicing those servers, and like investing upfront a lot of money. That's called capital expenditure. Whereas with the cloud, you don't need to do any of that. You basically rent servers or rent storage or databases, whatever you need from a cloud provider such as AWS, Amazon Web Services, Azure, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or there are several others, but those are the three main big ones. You rent those things on an as per needed basis. So if you need some servers today, you rent the servers today, and you don't need them tomorrow, you release them tomorrow, you decommission or you stop using them tomorrow, and you're paying an operational expense. You're no longer investing capital expenditure up front. You're paying an operational expense, and it's very flexible. It's very agile. You have access to way more different options. You don't have to guess your capacity in advance, your capacity or your needs. You need to train a big machine learning model this week. You have big servers this week, and then you don't need to train it. You don't need to pay for them. So it's a much better costing type of model. The infrastructure is shared, but at the same time, it is very secure, and so your data is not seen by the other companies using the same infrastructure. And basically, you outsource a lot of your headache, and the other big part is that there's economies of scale because other companies such as Airbnb or Netflix or Johnson Johnson, huge companies, Coca-Cola, McDonald's are all using cloud, and because there's so many companies using the same infrastructure, the cost goes down. So the prices for cloud are very low, and that's the attraction for business. So that's cloud in a nutshell. The benefits that you get there. And in terms of data scientists, it's mostly about where data science is going, and maybe Adlan can talk about this a bit.
Yeah. So basically, today to build the machine learning models and data science models, you need more and more compute intensive resource to train them. Simply because the models are, on the one hand more advanced, but also sometimes you have much bigger amount of data. And so, you know, cloud resources is not only a plus to train your machine learning models, it has become a necessity. And that is why there is this very strong convergence happening between data science and the cloud. Because indeed, now data scientists, in order to train their machine learning models, they will need the cloud resources, which include, two main types of things. First, the compute resources, which are the virtual servers with high and strong and powerful GPUs, and also storage, because we will talk about this later in this episode. You will see that in order to build machine learning models with the cloud, you can connect to the storage services of, for example, AWS and the compute services to build your machine learning models. And we will talk about that in a few moments.
And in addition to that, like if we even think, for example, of ChatGPT, which is completely entirely cloud-based. It's using Microsoft Azure. It's got 175 billion parameters. It gets 100 million users per month. That is a massive scale that is just very hard to maintain something like that on premise infrastructure. You'd have to buy lots of servers. You'd have to be scaling all the time, buying new servers. And then what if the demand drops? Like they're paying millions of dollars for this. I think it was like $100,000 per day to maintain ChatGPT, and that's thankfully because they're using cloud. If it was fixed infrastructure, it'd be much more expensive. So we're just seeing this, one of the biggest examples. But that's where the world is going. Like we're going towards much heavier compute intensive models and much more users that we will need to be servicing with these models and products that are being created. And that's why data scientists have to learn. It's like, I think Atlan already mentioned, is learning a cloud for data science is not just an advantage. It may look like an advantage today, but it is actually becoming a necessity. And the first people that jump on this train will be prepared for the future of tomorrow, which is coming really fast.
Nice. That makes perfect sense to me. And this explanation of the size of the ChatGPT model, and that's now orders of magnitude larger with the GPT-4 release that happened recently as well. And so this is something these models, these large language models, are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And while there are also research efforts to try to make ways of pruning away aspects of the model that aren't contributing overall or aren't contributing to specific tasks, we nevertheless have this ongoing trend of bigger and bigger models. So how prevalent is it out there that data scientists need to have cloud skills?
Yeah, John, it's very good that you asked this question, because there must be a realization from people that cloud skills have become a necessity. It's not just a plus, an advantage. It has become a necessity. For the very reason that we just mentioned, which is that machine learning models, data science models are becoming more and more complex, and therefore now to train them, well, the only solution is cloud resources. So yes, it's a necessity, and I think that this convergence between the data science and the cloud is gonna become narrower and narrower. It's gonna converge more, and the more it converges, the more cloud skills will become absolutely necessary to train the models. So yes, I think every data scientist now should at least know how to, for example, train a machine learning model with some AWS services, which we'll talk about in a few moments.
Yeah, and so AWS recently became a sponsor of the show. They had no influence on the content in this episode. This is
Yeah.
purely, it's a coincidence. But I understand that because AWS is the leader in cloud, so the three main providers are AWS, Google GCP, and Microsoft Azure. And actually, I got the order wrong there because it's you guys dug up these stats, but
Yeah.
you looked up from Statista.com that AWS has 34% of the cloud market, Azure 21%, and GCP 11%. So I guess it makes sense. Maybe this is your recommendation that given AWS has more market share than the other two combined, if you're going to start with one of these platforms, you should start with AWS.
Yeah, that's a good, that's about correct recommendation. And I also wanted to add that in terms of number of data science jobs that mention cloud skills, we did our own research, and we made sure to check it for statistical significance, or make a proper statistical research. So we wanted to come into this podcast saying that if you learn cloud skills, your salary is going to grow by X%, and we did find a slight increase in the average or the median salary of a data scientist from who's learning cloud versus the one who's not learning cloud, but unfortunately wasn't statistically significant, so we wouldn't be comfortable sharing that. But what definitely is a fact is that the number of jobs. So right now we found we looked at a sample size of about 190 jobs on Glassdoor literally yesterday, and we found that 37% of them, these are data science and machine learning jobs, 37% of them mention cloud skills, whether as a requirement or as a a preference. And based on the sample size and doing a statistical test, we can say that overall in the world, not in just our sample size of 190, overall in the world, this number is somewhere between 34% and 40%. So between 34 to 40% of data science and machine learning jobs already today, at the beginning in the first quarter of 2023, mention cloud skills as either a requirement or or a preference. And that's a big number already. It's already growing, so it's over a third. And another thing to mention about AWS, since you asked, John, of those of all data science machine learning jobs, about 20% of them mention AWS skills specifically. So not only AWS has the highest share of the market, but also it's a safe bet. Like, unless you know that a company that you want to work for or that you are working for is using Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud, then sure, learn those. Those are very good tools as well. And we're planning on learning them as well. Like, once we're confident, like we've done our first few certifications with AWS, we want to move on to those as well. But if you don't know which cloud platform to learn, start with AWS. It's a safe bet. There's lots of companies using it, from large businesses like mentioned before, Nike, Coca-Cola, Disney, all of Netflix. People might not know this, but all of Netflix is on AWS. They don't even have their own servers at all. All their videos, everything, their websites is running on AWS. Airbnb is running on AWS as well. So big companies are, and also startups, because it's so agile to spin things up. So whether you're looking to work for a big company or a startup, AWS is a safe bet to add to your skill set.
Yeah, from my perspective, getting startups going for the last 8-9 years, it's a no-brainer. Like I've built a couple of servers for doing a lot of computation prototyping for my data science team, where I knew I was going to need really big GPUs and that these instances were particularly expensive. Like I did the math and was like, okay, to have a couple of these on premise, we can save a little bit of money because we assume that we're going to be using one or two of these all the time. But for the most part, like any production infrastructure, you need your machine learning models. You don't know how many users you're going to have at any point. So you need to have your infrastructure, your production infrastructure scale up. And then even with this example of us having these data science servers on-prem, well, because models are getting larger and larger all the time, when we're doing intensive computation, we need to be turning on cloud instances anyway. So we might do a little prototyping on like small amounts of data on our local instances, on our on-premise instances, and then use the cloud when we're like, okay, we're going to use this full Google T5 model now on a huge amount of data. And this T5 model, I couldn't possibly fit it onto the one or two GPUs that I have on this one server on premise. We're going to need lots of compute in the cloud. So yeah, it's a no-brainer to me that data scientists need to be making use of cloud infrastructure for training models today, and especially for production inference, because yeah, you don't want to buy all of the infrastructure yourself to be able to handle the maximum number of users at any given time point that you want to be having using your application.
Exactly. And also, what you mentioned about these servers, they get outdated. New technology is coming out all the time. And you buy these servers, you put them on premises, and then 2 years later, you need to decommission and sell them. Whereas on the cloud, the cloud provider just automatically updates them, releases new versions. You can just switch to those with a click of a button. And you're not having these kind of like sunk costs that you have to deal with all the time.
Yeah, for sure.